Back in 2022, I made this groundbreaking video on the transatlantic accent, also known as the mid-Atlantic accent. In that video, I look at the history of the accent, and then with my dear friend Jack, we go through the phonetics of the accent and then try to recreate it in a sketch with hilarious results, as the 1.8 million viewers so far will testify. However, in a video posted by Dr. Lindsey entitled Hollywood's Fake Mid-Atlantic Myth Debunked, he pointed out some of the inaccuracies of my video and others on the transatlantic accent or mid-Atlantic accent. And in this video I want to address some of the points raised by Dr. Lindsey and correct some mistakes I made in my earlier video, as well as answer some of your comments and see whether the transatlantic accent really existed. We'll also look at some mind-boggling statistics from the golden era of Hollywood, explain why the era has so many great movies, and perhaps most importantly of all, I have some movie recommendations for you. Yes, that's right, my own personal favourites. Wonderful, wonderful movies from the 1930s and 1940s, perhaps with a hint of transatlantic accent. Do stick around for that. Hello and welcome to 11 Talk TV. My name's Gideon. Let's go. In this video, I'll be referring to it as the transatlantic accent rather than the mid-Atlantic accent. They both mean the same thing, but the mid-Atlantic accent is sometimes also used to describe the American accent of the mid-Atlantic region. So just to avoid confusion, I'll say transatlantic. To give some context, the story goes that the transatlantic accent was popularised by an Australian phonetician, William Tilley, and some of the followers of his method. Amongst them, Edith Skinner, who wrote a famous work called Speak with Distinction, published in 1942. Many famous actors between the 1930s and 1950s used this accent in movies of the era. It was neither upper-class British nor regional American, but something in between, hence its name. Anyway, that's the classic tale of the transatlantic accent told in many videos, including my own, and I'm going to talk about Dr. Lindsey's video in a second. But first, let's look at some of the angry comments on my own video following Dr. Lindsey's video. All videos talking on this subject are basing it on falsehoods that have been promoted by Wikipedia. That fake, based on a fake Wikipedia article and botched journalism, does not age well. Most of this has been completely and totally bunked. Embarrassing. Dr. Lindsey brilliantly debunks this video, but sadly only has half the views. Yes, Dr. Lindsey's video only has 1 million views. So sad, he must be totally traumatized. Just another example of an echo chamber brain rot that probably stems from Wikipedia. It's ironic that these commenters accuse me of just regurgitating Wikipedia when these people base their expertise on the subject on this one video of Dr. Lindsey's. I get the impression they've not watched a single movie from that era. Furthermore, I don't think they've even watched the whole of Dr. Lindsey's video. Many of them must have stopped watching at around the 1.5 minute mark when he mentions Wikipedia.
Telling pretty much exactly the same story as if they've all been based on a single Wikipedia article of mixed accuracy.
Even if they did watch the whole of Dr. Lindsey's video, they certainly didn't understand it. And yeah, I'm coming to that in a moment. But to answer your question, no, I didn't just regurgitate Wikipedia. Do you know how much research I did? I'll tell you, about 40 years. Before you spew your vitriol in the comment section, go out and watch 200 movies from the golden age of Hollywood. I've loved these old movies since I was a boy. While the other kids in my neighbourhood were out on a Saturday afternoon playing football or riding their bikes by the canal, I was at home watching a Frank Capra double bill on BBC Two. I was a weird kid, I admit that. Now, Dr. Lindsey's video is a lot more subtle than these commenters give him credit for, if I'm interpreting it correctly. He didn't exactly say that the transatlantic accent didn't exist at all, but rather that it is far more complicated and far more interesting than the classic story that I and others told in our videos.
Now, there's more than a grain of truth in all of this. There was indeed an accent often referred to as American theatre standard that was heavily influenced by British received pronunciation and was indeed taught to many American actors, and which can be heard from a lot of old Hollywood performers. But attributing the speech styles of old Hollywood movies to this one fake accent is a gross oversimplification. Reality is more complex and far more interesting.
He raises a number of interesting points, and some of them, I must say, I also mentioned in my video. Once again, this is my own interpretation of Dr. Lindsey's video, so certainly do check out his video. Now, what I'm going to do is divide the speakers into 4 categories. The first category, some of the so-called speakers of this accent came from the East Coast, and especially Eastern New England. Many were upper class speakers, and they had an accent that shared some of the features of the transatlantic accent, such as the non-rhotic R. So these people, they didn't acquire the accent at a theatre school. That was their native speech. This is how they spoke with their families, with their servants, on the streets of Boston and Providence, Rhode Island. So, for example, I made the mistake of suggesting that Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR, had a transatlantic accent. But no, he was educated at a private school in Massachusetts and had a privileged background. And that was his native speech.
I cannot tell you when or where the United Nations are going to strike next in Europe, but we are going to strike and strike hard.
Dr. Lindsey mentions this in his video, although I should say I had already realised my mistake before his video. Roosevelt was born in 1882, so the maths just doesn't add up. He would have gone to school and grown up long before Tilly, Skinner and their crowd were telling people to talk like this. Now, the second category are actors and actresses from this same region on the East Coast and New England. Now, almost all actors during this period would have had vocal training, or elocution lessons as they would have been called then, and as a theatre actor it would have been part of the curriculum. If you were acting in a play by Shakespeare or Oscar Wilde, any work of literature from England, you didn't need to sound British, but you probably didn't want to sound too American either. But as a New Englander, your accent already had many of the features we associate with the transatlantic accent. So it's hard to extricate the accent they grew up with the vocal training they had for theatre and film. When we talk about the transatlantic accent, Katherine Hepburn comes up again and again. But she was a member of this East Coast elite, so her natural accent would already have had many of the transatlantic features.
I see that in addition to your other charms, you have that insolence generated by an inferior upbringing.
Fancy clothes, fancy language and everything.
Unfortunately, I learned to speak English correctly.
She was from Hartford, Connecticut. Now, not all actors from that town and from that period spoke with that accent. For example, Gary Merrill, the actor and husband of Betty Davis, was also from Hartford and didn't speak like that.
I'm nothing but a body with a voice, no mind.
What a body. What a voice.
But again, she was from an upper class upbringing, which might have set her accent apart from other speakers of the town. Betty Davis is another actress with features of that accent, and she too was from the East Coast and came from an upper class background. So once again, it's difficult to know how much was the accent she grew up with and how much was acquired.
Now, Sherry, I think we will talk a bit.
Now, look here, Maggie. Just because a friend of mine happens to come out here and spend Christmas with me...
I don't think she happened to come out here, Sherry. I don't think that at all.
Surely you're not suggesting that I had anything to do about it?
Yes, Sherry, I am.
Maggie.
The third category are those actors mistakenly said to have a transatlantic accent. Top of this list is Cary Grant. He's kind of the poster child of the transatlantic accent. Both Dr Lindsey and I mentioned this mistake. Cary Grant was British and moved to the US at the age of 16. So yes, he had this blend of a British and American accent, but it wasn't a transatlantic accent. He didn't acquire it from a vocal coach. That's just how he spoke.
Well, anyway, I'm going to get married, Susan, and don't interrupt.
No.
Now, my future wife has always regarded me as a man of some dignity.
Ingrid Bergman, another actress on countless lists of transatlantic speakers, no, she was Swedish, as Dr. Lindsey points out. Also, many comments on my video get this wrong. For example, comments have said that Laurence Olivier and Alec Guinness had transatlantic accents. No, they were British. And just to be clear, the transatlantic accent was a way of speech adopted by some American actors of the era. It sounded a little more British than standard American, but British actors had no need to acquire this accent because they were already British. By the way, one of the other absurd things you read about in relation to the transatlantic accent that Dr. Lindsey mentions in his video is the idea that it all arose because it was the best suited to the sound equipment of the day. It's like saying that the technology of the day only understood posh people.
Many of the articles and videos lurch from dodgy linguistics into science fiction, telling us that the fake accent was favoured when old technology had no bass frequencies because it was so tinny and nasal.
This nasally clipped pronunciation is a vestige from the early days of radio. Receivers had very little bass technology at the time, and bass frequencies were difficult to hear.
And the technicians realized that the mid-Atlantic accent's nasal qualities were easier to pick up.
It was so clearly ludicrous that I didn't talk about it in my video. Anyway, the fourth category are actors and actresses who did actively learn to speak this way. They acquired it. Either they were trained to speak like that and that's how they spoke all the time on and off screen. It was part of their persona. The accent they grew up with, they left in a trunk in the attic of the family home in Cincinnati or something. Alternatively, they learned the accent for certain roles in movies, but off screen they continued speaking with the accent they grew up with. For example, Mary Astor, who was from Ohio, uses the transatlantic accent in The Maltese Falcon, but as Dr. Lindsey points out, she uses general American accent in other movies. So let's have a look at a few of these actors. These include Claudette Colbert. She was from Manhattan.
Yes, I want to talk to Mr. Dawes. This is Miss David calling. Marilyn David.
William Powell from Kansas.
Take me with you.
Well, I'm taking so much excess baggage, I suppose I might as well take you too.
Vincent Price was from St. Louis.
Good evening. I'm your host, Frederick Lauren. Since we're all strangers to each other, let's get acquainted with a drink, shall we?
Orson Welles from Illinois.
On the other hand, I am the publisher of the Inquirer. As such, it's my duty, and I'll let you in on a little secret. It's also my pleasure to see to it that decent, hard-working people in this community aren't robbed blind by a pack of money-mad pirates.
For those of you interested in this topic, I think what was lacking in my video, and in fact all the videos on the transatlantic accent, are some film recommendations. When I was growing up in England, films from the golden age were regularly on TV, and as we only had 3 TV channels at that time and no internet, of course, you might end up watching a 1940s, I don't know, romantic comedy on a rainy Saturday afternoon because there was nothing else on that you wanted to watch. If I remember, it was either that or wrestling with the likes of Mick McManus and Kendo Nagasaki, which I didn't much care for.
And reverse double knee hold by Nagasaki. He must have the weight to hold it. He's got it.
Most people who grew up in this century haven't been exposed to these films. A few have seen Gone with the Wind or The Wizard of Oz, maybe because they're in colour, and sometimes Casablanca or Modern Times or It's a Wonderful Life, maybe Citizen Kane, but rarely do I hear other films being mentioned. Can you find these movies on Netflix or any other streaming service? No, except a few on YouTube, which I'll talk about soon. So someone wishing to know more might need some guidance. And let me tell you, I've seen hundreds of these films, the good, the bad, and the mediocre. Before I share my top picks, here are some facts and stats about the movies and movie-going of the era. The numbers are staggering. In 1930, weekly cinema attendance in the US was 80 million people, approximately 65% of the US population. In the year 2000, it was 27.3 million, or 9.7% of the US population. Everyone was going to the movies all the time, and it wasn't just how often they went, it was also how much money they spent. Between 1942 and 1945, Americans were spending 23% of their recreation budget on movies. Today, it's 2%. In Britain, 1946 was the peak for cinema attendance, with 1.6 billion admissions. That is equivalent to every man, woman and child in the UK going to see a movie 33 times a year. And that's just the average. Have you been to the cinema 33 times this year? So why were the movies of that era so great? Well, firstly, they produced a lot more movies. During World War II, Hollywood's major studios released an average of 287 films a year. Today, its output is about 140 per year, and with more than double the movies, and with a much greater population than they had then. They weren't all great, but even if 10% were great, that's still a lot. Secondly, the audience was different. These days, a higher proportion of young people, especially young men, attend the cinema, and this skews production to favour movies that appeal to this demographic. Action movies, sci-fi and fantasy movies, superhero movies and the like. In the 1930s and 1940s, everybody went to the movies, young and old, male and female, rich and poor. The last time I went to the cinema in London, it cost me £16, but in the heyday, even during the Depression, ticket prices were more affordable, and all this meant that the themes of the movies were different. They had to appeal to every age and every class, from middle-aged bankers to milkmen and elevator girls. Everyone went to the movies. This might also explain why there were so many great roles for women and fewer male action heroes as there are today. Great writers. Many of the greatest writers of the 20th century wrote screenplays for Hollywood movies. These include F. Scott Fitzgerald, William Faulkner, John Steinbeck, Raymond Chandler, Aldous Huxley, Dashiell Hammett, Dorothy Parker.
Shame. Well, what does your father do?
He's a farmer.
Social registerite father. Fed up with hypocrisies of 400, sought wilderness for consolation. There amidst the mountain flowers, he raised another blossom, his lovely little daughter. What's your name?
Esther Victoria Blanchett.
And Clifford Odets, to name but a few. That's an impressive list, I'm sure you agree. Censorship. The Hays Code restricted what could be shown on screen. It was in force in the 1930s, from 1934, and in the 1940s. It seems counterintuitive that censorship could improve the quality of the movies. But it pushed filmmakers to be more creative. Directors had to imply themes rather than show them explicitly. They had to be imaginative and creative to get around the censors. They used suggestion and metaphor and all kinds of tricks, both in the scripts and the cinematography, and that led to more nuanced and interesting storytelling. For example, in Key Largo, when Johnny Rocco whispers something to Lauren Bacall, you don't actually hear what he says, but you know it's something lewd just from her reaction. There was no mention of homosexuality, so you had to resort to innuendo. For example, in The Maltese Falcon, Cairo's character has a perfumed business card.
Gardenia.
Quick, darling, in with him.
Will you come in, Mr. Cairo?
You couldn't talk about infidelity, but you might be able to get away with a joke about it.
I love you.
It's rather difficult to believe that when I find you dining with another woman.
That woman? Do you know why I sat with her? Because
No.
she reminded me of you.
Really?
Of course. That's why I'm sitting here with you. Because you remind me of you. Your eyes, your throat, your lips. Everything about you reminds me of you. Except you.
There was no sex. Instead, you got clips of curtains falling or trains going into tunnels.
Well. Looks like we're closed for the rest of the afternoon.
The studio system. Hollywood operated under a tightly controlled studio system where major studios like MGM, Warner Brothers, Paramount and 20th Century Fox had their own contracted actors, directors and writers. Today there is a lot more freedom for the directors, the writers, the actors, which is a good thing. But while there was less creative control in the studio system for the filmmakers, it had advantages. It was kind of a factory with its assembly line delivering constantly high quality movies. So here are 6 masterpieces from the golden age of Hollywood, plus a bonus movie. I'll explain why it's a bonus movie in a moment. Now, all of these movies are great. Most have speakers with the transatlantic accent, but not all. And, well, I'll explain as I go along. And all of these movies I have chosen were made in the decade between 1934 and 1944. It's debatable when the golden era came to an end, but I'm placing it sometime shortly after the end of World War II, although my film is a little bit before that, 1944. So let's do this in chronological order. And the first film is It Happened One Night by Frank Capra. The rich and powerful Alexander Andrews has imprisoned his daughter Ellie in a yacht, but not in a bad way. She has servants and a chef, but her father won't let her off the ship because Ellie had secretly got married to a slimy gold digger, a guy called King Wesley, someone her father doesn't approve of. Now he wants her to annul the marriage, but she refuses. Ellie jumps off the boat and escapes, and in order to evade her father, she takes a bus from Florida to meet King Wesley in New York. But who do you think she meets on the bus but a reporter played by Clark Gable?
Excuse me, lady, but that upon which you sit is mine.
I beg your pardon.
Now listen, I put up a stiff fight for that seat, so if it's just the same to you, scram.
As well as Claudette Colbert, look out for the transatlantic accent of Walter Connolly, who plays Alexander Andrews. Fascinating fact here, Jameson Thomas, who played King Wesley, appeared in 18 movies in 1934 alone. Could that happen today? Next we have a hit Broadway play that got made and turned into a magnificent movie and turned one of the actors from a bit part player into a Hollywood legend. It's The Petrified Forest of 1936. It takes place in a remote desert cafe. A disillusioned writer from England, full of charm but with no money, walks in and immediately strikes up a friendship with a dreamy waitress who's desperate to leave the cafe for an adventure in France. Also in the cafe, her maybe boyfriend who works at the gas station, her father, her grandfather, and a few customers. Oh yes, and then some gangsters wander in and hold them hostage. Conversations ensue, and a bit of shooting.
Well, this place is called Black Mesa.
Black Mesa.
Where are you planning to go?
I had a vague idea I'd like to see the Pacific Ocean, or perhaps drown in it.
Pronunciation geeks, you can compare the British accent of Leslie Howard, who plays the hobo writer, to the maybe it is, maybe it isn't transatlantic accent of Betty Davis, who plays the waitress. Humphrey Bogart plays the gangster Duke in his first major role. Now, there is an extraordinary backstory behind the casting. Although Humphrey Bogart played Duke in the Broadway play with Howard, Warner Brothers wanted to cast Edward G. Robinson for the role in the movie, as he was much more famous than Bogart at the time. But Howard refused to appear in the movie if Bogart didn't get the role as Duke. And as I said, the film made Bogart a star, and they became lifelong friends after that. Well, I say lifelong friends, but actually Howard was killed during World War II when his flight from Lisbon to London was shot down by the Luftwaffe. And in 1952, Bogart and Lauren Bacall named their daughter Leslie Howard Bogart in honour of Howard. The next movie is The Philadelphia Story, 1940. Now, he might not have a transatlantic accent, but how can you have a list of movies of the golden era without including Cary Grant? Or Katherine Hepburn, or James Stewart for that matter. And all three of them star in this fast-paced society comedy from 1940. It tells the story of Dexter Haven, played by Cary Grant, who is divorced from Tracy Lord, Katherine Hepburn, who is shortly going to marry someone else. But do they still love each other? Will they get back together? Meanwhile, a handsome young journalist, played by James Stewart, may just rock the boat.
Hello.
Hello.
What, couldn't you afford to buy my book?
The bookstore didn't have one.
Well, are you sure you're doing the right thing? You know what happens to girls like you when they read books like mine. They begin to think. That's bad.
These stories are beautiful. Why, Connor, they're almost poetry.
Well, don't kid yourself. They are.
Here's Girl Friday, another fast-paced comedy, also from 1940, also starring Cary Grant, tells the story of a hard-boiled newspaperman, Walter Burns, played by Cary Grant, who is divorced from Hildy Johnson, who is shortly going to marry someone else. But do they still love each other? Will they get back together? Hold on, haven't I heard that somewhere before? Yes, but that's where the similarities with the Philadelphia Story end. Hildy Johnson is set to cover one last story, that of Earl Williams, who is about to be executed. Can Hildy save his life?
Yes, I wish you hadn't done that, Hildy.
Done what?
Divorce me. Makes a fella lose all faith in himself. Almost gives him a feeling he wasn't wanted.
Now, none of the main characters has a transatlantic accent, but the reason I chose it, apart from the fact that it's a classic of the era, is that it's in the public domain, and you can find it right here on YouTube, and I'll put a link in the description. Coming up next is one of the few cases that I've come across where the movie is better than the book. And Dashiell Hammett's The Maltese Falcon is a tight, gripping thriller, but the movie, well, it's just on a different level, with an extraordinary cast of Humphrey Bogart and Mary Astor and Peter Lorre and Sidney Greenstreet. The Maltese Falcon, this is the 1942 version of the film, directed by John Huston. There have been other versions. There is no CGI, of course, no special effects, and even though it's set in San Francisco, you wouldn't know it except for a brief clip of the Golden Gate Bridge at the beginning. It's totally studio bound, but the gritty action, snappy dialogue and flawless performances grip you from the start. It's a classic film noir. It's all about the quest for a statue of a little black bird. It starts when Sam Spade is hired by Miss O'Shaughnessy to find her missing sister. While investigating, people get killed. But does he get the bird? We'll have to watch to find out.
I'll just leave that to us. We'll know how to handle him.
Oh, but I want you to know he's a dangerous man. I honestly don't think he'd stop at anything. I don't think he'd hesitate to kill Corinne if he thought it would save him.
Could he cover up by marrying her?
He has a wife and 3 children in England.
Yes, they usually do, though not always in England.
Curious thing to look out for? When the ship's captain stumbles into Spade's office and drops dead, the actor is played by Walter Huston, the director John Huston's father. Double Indemnity, 1944. Next, another film noir. This one I promise will keep you on the edge of your seat. Walter Neff, played by Fred McMurray, is an insurance salesman and he falls in love with a married woman, Barbara Stanwyck. They decide to kill her husband in order to claim the life insurance.
Fire, earthquake, theft, public liability, group insurance, industrial stuff, and so on right down the line.
Accident insurance?
Accident insurance? Sure, Mr. Dietrichson. What you tell me was engraved on that anklet.
Just my name.
As for instance?
Phyllis.
Phyllis, huh? I think I like that.
But you're not sure.
I'd have to drive it around the block a couple of times.
Again, none of the main characters has a transatlantic accent, but how could I not include a movie from Billy Wilder? Finally, the bonus movie. It's My Man Godfrey from 1936. You may be wondering why this is a bonus and not in my top 7. Well, that's because while many people do consider this a classic, I don't find it that funny. Unlike the other comedies I mentioned, the jokes are just a bit dated. And I'll let you be the judge. And, well, it's good enough. And lots of people do love the film. But certainly it's no masterpiece. The reason I've included it is because, well, for a couple of reasons. If you're a student of the transatlantic accent, this is one to watch. It stars William Powell and co-stars Gail Patrick. And it's also in the public domain and available on YouTube. I'll put a link in the description. So what's it about? It tells the story of a homeless man who is befriended on a rubbish dump by a New York socialite, and she invites him to become the butler in the opulent home of her goofy family, with what some would say are hilarious consequences.
I said, how would you like to make $5?
$5?
$5.
I don't want to seem inquisitive, but what would I have to do for it?
Oh, all you have to do is go to the Waldorf Ritz Hotel with me, and I'll show you to a few people, and then I'll send you right back.
May I inquire just why you would want to show me to people at the Waldorf Ritz?
Oh, if you must know it's a game, you've probably heard about it, a scavenger hunt. If I find a forgotten man first, I win. Is that clear?
Yes, quite clear. Shall I wear my tails or come just as I am?
You needn't be fresh. Do you want the $5 or don't you?
Madam, I can't tell you how flattered I am by your very generous offer.
George!
However, I'm afraid I'll have to take it up with my board of directors.
It's so difficult just to choose 6 movies from that era. I'm sure that those out there who are already fans of this era will be seething in their galoshes because I didn't include their favourites. There's no Alfred Hitchcock, no Charles Chaplin, no Marx Brothers. Are you crazy? But that's what the comments section is for. So yeah, let us know your favourite 6 movies from the period 1929 to 1945 only. Yes, only from this golden age of Hollywood, if you please. And if you like this video, maybe I'll make a part 2 with some more recommendations, or perhaps some recommendations of British movies of the era. What do you think?
What is it?
The stuff that dreams are made of.